So I would like to introduce to you, for those who don't know yet, Professor Stefan Hockertz.
He is incredible for us here in Switzerland. We love you here, and we love your work, and it is a great honor to have you here in person tonight. He will tell us something about the WHO and this story and bring it closer to us. So from that, take away.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much.
Have I already received so much applause before? I haven't even said anything yet. So today I actually want to, it was a very, very spontaneous matter. 3 days ago, I didn't know I would be standing here. And then Christian kept working on it until it worked out. Good. Okay. I want to talk about the topic of the WHO and Switzerland, and then I put the term there via the WHO, the organization, and hung the logo of the association WIR next to Switzerland. That is indeed something typically Swiss, and I want to structure it a bit. It won't be long, half an hour at most. I would like to say something, present some facts about the WHO that might not be known to some. I want to talk about how the WHO has developed over the last 30, 40 years and not to its advantage. Then I pose a provocative question. Does the WHO belong in Switzerland, and does Switzerland belong in the WHO? I ask you to form an opinion on that. Then I will address, this is directly related, the Spiez laboratory. It's not far from here, right? It's in our immediate neighborhood. What happens there is insane, is hair-raising. I want to say a few words about gain of function and about a letter from Robert Kennedy, how we responded to this letter from Robert Kennedy. And I have to be completely honest, folks, it's getting too warm for me.
I'm just getting too warm.
Thank you, thank you. So, and you should always carry the message with you, right? Also, I didn't say anything, right? So not that it was said.
Someone gets the idea. I'm just wearing the t-shirt by chance.
What is the WHO? The World Health Organization is a very importantly unelected organization. It was not elected by you, it was not elected by any person in this world. It was established after the Second World War as a special organization of the United Nations to be, so to speak, supportive, very important, supportive and advisory in health matters.
The World Health Organization has its own constitution. I will get to that later.
Who funds the WHO? This is getting interesting again. It is funded, over $3.6 billion flow into it, mainly from the USA. Oh no, just not anymore. For a few months now, the USA under Trump has withdrawn from the WHO. And I always like to connect this with the suggestion, no, yes, we are here in Switzerland, and Switzerland always glances with one eye, you know, towards the USA, and what comes from there, that's always good. We have to do that too. Hey, then why not also leave the WHO? That would be a straightforward idea. I will come back to that later. But the money from the United States is gone. So who continues to fund it? Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Yes, we know them, right? And that is a private organization that has purely private interests and implements these interests very firmly through this WHO. Germany is also still financing it. Well, I think they will also gradually drop out because we don't have any more money to contribute. The entire European Union Commission, yes, and also Switzerland. And Switzerland in particular, as I mentioned earlier, not only is Switzerland in the World Health Organization, but does it also offer the World Health Organization its home. One must consider whether it is particularly good for Switzerland to do something like that. And then there are other financing mechanisms. Global Alliance for Vaccines and Immunization. Gavi is nothing other than what Gates has financed, so to speak. And they also finance this WHO So, when we talk about donations purely legally, and that's ultimately how it should be seen, a donation is always dependent on its use. That means when I give a donation, I say, I donate for this purpose. I donate so that Christian can afford a Ferrari, then he is only allowed to buy a Ferrari and not a handcart with it. That would mean he is misusing the donation, and that is a crime. This means that since a large part or almost all donations are earmarked, they serve private economic interests. And I've already discussed this quite extensively with Michael Niels, and he has also done great interviews on the topic. These interests are exactly the ones that Christian already presented to you earlier. They are not our interests, dear people. They are the interests of a private organization that seeks world domination. Who is actually the Director General? This guy was already seen earlier in a photo of yours. His name is Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus. The man is a war criminal. The man is a serious criminal. He is a war criminal. He is involved in the genocide in Ethiopia. You can read about it in the NZZ from May 28, 2023. Nevertheless,
this serious criminal.
This company leads, nevertheless, all employees of the WHO enjoy immunity in our Switzerland. They can afford whatever they want. And they do it too. Bill Gates is allowed in the USA, is allowed in Switzerland to commit the most serious crime you can imagine. And I don't mean murder by that.
I mean pedophilia by that. He would be allowed to do it. I did not just say that he does it.
He would be allowed to do it without being punished.
In this country.
That is embarrassing.
If we look at the development of the WHO has clearly changed its character. It was originally indeed an organization that made announcements which were not legally binding. And that has now changed. These recommendations are becoming legally binding orders that has to do with responsibility. Yes, you mentioned earlier these 7 federal councillors. I always have to be careful. I'm just a guest here in the country. Those who know me know that's a running gag. Whenever I say I'm a guest in this country, I can say something afterward. These 7 federal councillors shirk their responsibility by handing it over to the World Health Organization. So Billy and his associates. Just imagine that. The ones you elected turn around and say, no, we'd rather not do the job. It's too dangerous for us. And, oh, we might have a problem later. Oh, let the WHO do it. That's the whole trick behind it. Irresponsible actions. And then, of course, it's easy to say we hand it over to an organization that in its own constitution, you must read it, has clearly stated in its new constitution that democratic control is neither possible nor desirable for them. Well, fine.
Mrs. Merkel also dreamed of that in her wildest dreams, right? That she would one day, did I say Merkel? Damn, yes. So former female chancellors in the big canton also thought that.
And very importantly, respect for dignity and human rights have recently been removed from the WHO's constitution. Do you want to put yourselves in the hands of such a group? Clear answer, no. The WHO, however, has further developed, and they said, of course, they are unfortunately called World Health. The word health stands for health. So we stand for World Health Organization as the leading coordinating authority. And therefore, they said, we need to expand the concept of a pandemic, and they have done so in this new constitution. All right, we can say a pandemic is a virus that jumps from one person to another or a bacterium, but that's not enough. So recently, climate is also a pandemic. Yes, you're laughing. It's not a joke. The development of the climate is a pandemic. I don't know how that's supposed to be contagious, but so what?
The loss of biodiversity, degradation of the ecosystem.
Too overweight people, that all belongs to what is referred to as a pandemic. This means the concept of a pandemic and thus the ability to intervene in the states is being extended infinitely.
created and continued. It means if you think this is only about health issues, then you are very mistaken. It's about more. It's actually about the fact that not only, so to speak, the WHO is given the authority to tell the states what they have to do, that will then be enforced, but they are allowed to do so not only on health issues, but actually on all issues that affect our lives. We could actually do without the Federal Council. I'm just a guest here, but I could say we could actually do without the Federal Council, and we say, Tedros, you go ahead as a serious criminal. At least we know you are a serious criminal. Aban, erkennt was Sentian.
I'm talking myself into trouble today. So,
what problem points do we have with the WHO? I want to summarize that for you again. It is not a reputable, it is not an organization elected by you, and it also has no quality control. You cannot go and tell the Federal Council, I do not agree with the WHO's measures. Then he says, yes, I don't either, but the WHO is doing it. That means there is no control. You can't vote them out. You can't take their money away. You can't put them in prison anymore because they have immunity. Zero control. And you all know what happens when an organization, or not even an organization, when people become uncontrolled.
Then you know exactly what happens. That can only mean disaster.
But it goes on. We have no mechanism for ending an emergency, which, funnily enough, when pronounced in English, also sounds like fake.
I didn't think about that.
That means the emergency can be declared unilaterally by the Director General of the WHO. So he sits in front of the TV in the evening and says, oh, from today it's a state of emergency and no one can do anything about it. Just imagine that. A single guy who also has an interesting past is given such power over many, many countries, over many parliaments, and he can declare a state of emergency. You all know what a state of emergency means. A state of emergency means that we no longer have a mechanism for checks and balances, that we can ultimately be governed in a crisis mode. And I hope you all still remember curfews.
No more education for children. No longer visiting people who are dying because somehow one was not vaccinated. All these stories were a small taste of what can be enforced with the stroke of a pen if Mr. Tetro decides so in the evening.
It cannot be. And we have ultimately, because we are not allowed to discuss the measures taken, no way to manage this crisis in any way. And you already notice it is going in this direction. This is one of my favorite lectures that I give when I present it in a different context. This is the so-called perma-crisis.
Constantly recurring crises.
Until 2022, you heard nothing but corona, 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 corona. And then came February 22, and from one day to the next, it was suddenly Ukraine, 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 Ukraine. Always nicely moving from one crisis to the next without being able to review the measures taken, without crisis management. Yes, that is later a WHO dictatorship. Why did I tell you this? Because we have a very, very exciting organization right next door. It's called Spiez Laboratory. Now, I have to say again, I'm always a guest in this country. I find it nice that there are laboratories here, and I have known this for a long time from my work in Germany. Research is being done. There are intelligent people working on viruses, bacteria, poisons, certain things. And that's fine if it happens like that in Switzerland. I just want to say that up front. The problem is this laboratory in Spiez has been explored as a WHO hub. What does that mean? That means that this WHO BioHUB Spiez is a system for the global rapid exchange of BSL-4 biological material. Here, gain-of-function research is conducted, dual use, meaning it can be used for civilian purposes, but also in case of war, that this is happening here. And the Swiss government has, and we must say this very clearly, this great Spiez laboratory, yes, maybe even employees are sitting here.
I'm not asking if anyone here is involved, but maybe some are sitting here. That would be nice. You need to know who your master is. It is no longer the sovereign. It is not the national defense of Switzerland. They are actually subordinate here, right? Actually, civil protection. It is the WHO.
And thus, this is ultimately an international armory.
I mean, if you know Spiez a little, take a drive to Wimmis. And what's there?
Exactly, the nitrochemie. That is no coincidence. That is no coincidence.
By the way, that has the largest arms factory from Germans. Yes, that's not your place. It belongs to Rheinmetall, to name it. And they are sitting next door. None of this is a coincidence. The paths are short, and that was intentional. And also with international pharmaceutical companies, I had some fun with it, which will come up again later. But I always have to mention Peter Eberhard. Unfortunately, he is not here today.
From Ellenbach, a very simple druggist, as he appears. In reality, he has the wisdom of Faust. He has done an incredible amount of research on this whole topic. We'll get back to that later. And he simply laid down for a while and said, who is actually going in and out?
And there you can see all the pharmaceutical companies that are also bustling in the Spiez laboratory. That means they are the true rulers over the Spiez laboratory, which you still believe is under the control of civil protection and thus the Federal Council. This raises open questions for me, of course. Again, I am just a guest, but still there are open questions for me in the area of sovereignty and security. Do you just accept this?
By the way, you put up with it just the same, where this morning I was really about to bring up my dinner again.
As there is a government councillor in St. Gallen, and he once rushed ahead and said, anyone who doesn't get vaccinated must pay a fine of 20,000 francs. But now he realizes that he won't get far with the fine. And he gave an interview at SAF. Check it out.
I commented on it on LinkedIn.
He says there literally, no, this is not a punishment. No, you can choose.
You have the choice.
Injection or 20,000 francs.
First of all, this calls every vaccination into question. So if I can buy my way out with 20,000 francs, that's already something. But no, think further. Only one word comes to mind: antisocial. The rich can buy their way out with 20,000 francs and the poor get the stuff injected into their upper arm. Well, thank you very much. Do you want to live in such a country?
That will be difficult. So, this man says it with a smile on his face on SAF, and no one stands up.
Everyone puts up with it and says, well, if he says so, I'll check if I have 20,000. Oh, just kidding. Oh,
People.
We are at a very dangerous crossroads. As I said, this is just an example, very current, of what happened today. And this is the open question of sovereignty and security.
What else will you put up with?
Yes, and when we look at this WOW BioHUB in Spiez, then of course it is a question I have always asked myself. How should one actually proceed during a pandemic or within the framework of a pathogen access and benefit system, abbreviated as PABBS? How should that actually happen? And today we know that. We know how pathogens are collected, stored, multiplied, and passed on there. And ultimately, all of this takes place in the Spiez laboratory. And this is the book. I'm happy to promote it. I wrote a foreword for it. It is also published by you, right? By the association WIR. This is the book by Peter Eberhard, and I find it so great. He really sat on trees, yes, and observed the progress of the construction site next to the highway, right when you drive over the bridge from the Kanda. He discovered that a construction is taking place there, going 5 floors underground.
A large basement?
And that in all likelihood, and we have thought a lot about it and researched a lot about it, that this construction, which is really made of massive concrete, is located in an old clay pit or gravel pit next to the highway with insane supply lines. Yes, so that is not a basement, right? That is most likely the new Spiez laboratory. And they have given themselves away. I have to tell you that in this context. It's also in his book, a little story on the topic. The Spiez laboratory is supposed to be renewed in 2027 at the same location where it currently stands, at this highway interchange. Renewed means it will be demolished and rebuilt. So I myself have worked in such labs for a long time. Guys, at 2, we need 3 years for something like that. New construction, new setup, and so on and so forth. But now the Spiez laboratory, as we found out, has accepted orders for 2028.
Yes, where are they supposed to work then? On the construction site of the demolished lab?
No, a new lab has been built in parallel, which has a completely different quality and completely different possibilities, in which it conflicts with the work of the laboratory, is certainly 30, 40 years old. It has indeed aged and needs to be renewed, but I cannot yet accept orders for the time when it is supposed to be renewed, when it will be demolished. That doesn't fit. So many things don't fit. He called the whole thing horror from the lab. At first I thought it was sensationalist, but in reality it's true. It really is the title. I can only recommend it to you. An exciting book. Let's just note, here on Swiss soil, we need to summarize. Here on Swiss soil, gain-of-function research is being conducted, which means enhancing the biological properties of a pathogen, and not to make it nicer, but to make it more dangerous. In dual-use research, meaning it can also be used for military purposes.
This takes place here in Spiez, under the supervision of the WHO, under supervision
from large companies
who are involved in the fields of pharmaceuticals and war research. Parallel to this, something happened in the United States where we actually say, wow, how can that be? In the international context, on January 25th, 2025, the White House issued a statement on the origin of COVID-19. For us, this was all not new. I could have also called Mr. Trump and said, we already know all of this. We can also prove to you what you're just saying, as we worked on this intensively with Michael Niels, whom I like to mention repeatedly. We, to the point that we can even trace the path from Chapel Hill, Carolina, that's where the lab was, where the whole thing was created, all the way to China. And he says there is a leak hypothesis that should be taken seriously. That means forget Drosten. He didn't say that because he probably doesn't even know him. Forget Drosten with his strange bat hypothesis. That's not true. Instead, it is a virus created by humans in a lab. This can be proven molecularly. It's not difficult at all. But even Trump came up with the idea and said, that's how it is. And he actually made a publication about it at the White House. The whole thing did not remain without consequences. 4 months later, on the 5th of May 2025, Trump, and now you really have to let this sink in, signs an executive order in which he halts any government support for what the government refers to as dangerous gain-of-function research, both abroad.
Also, Switzerland is abroad, as well as within the United States.
No more money for gain-of-function research and dual use. And what are we doing here in Spiez? Exactly the opposite. Something must be wrong, right? Think about that. And then there was the gift of the year, even though it's only a few days old. I couldn't believe it. Robert Kennedy writes, and that's actually nonsense what I wrote there, to his counterpart, which is an insult to Robert Kennedy. So he writes to Annina Warken, yes, who for whatever reason became the health minister in Germany. He writes her a letter. And in this letter, he criticizes Warken, which will be shown in the next image. He writes her a letter, and I saw this letter first in our alternative media, and I thought, oh no, come on, someone made this up again. Right? That's not true. That's fake news again. No, it was actually written. And what does it say in there? I just have to read it to you. I need to go over here because I don't know it by heart yet. So he wrote a letter and also made a video to Nina Warken about the wave of persecution against doctors and scientists in Germany.
And you can see that in Switzerland just the same.
I quote, "The current events in Germany require a clear public response from the United States of America. I have learned that more than 1,000 German doctors and thousands of patients are being prosecuted because they granted exemptions from wearing masks or from the COVID-19 vaccination during the pandemic." When a government criminalizes doctors for giving their patients advice that has been considered sacred, not important or necessary, sacred in free societies. And in my letter, I explained that Germany targets those who put their patients first and punishes citizens for making their own medical decisions. The German government is currently violating this sacred relationship between patient and doctor and creating a dangerous system that turns doctors, I can extend this further, also scientists, into enforcers of state policy. And when I saw this letter, and it really turned out that this letter actually exists, I couldn't believe it at first. I called Christian and said, we have to do something. And I got in touch with Robert Malone, whom I know from my previous work. And we said, okay, we have to do something now. And we did. I wrote letters to Trump, to Kennedy, oh yes, also to the Federal Council, far right, but we wrote letters to Trump and Kennedy. These letters are on the internet. I don't want to read them to you now. These letters are visible on the internet. You can download them there. You can read them there. The topic of the letter or the topic of the letters is as follows. There are always two things mentioned in them. On one side, we asked Donald Trump, tell me, you write some decrees? Yes, some things from the 5th of May 25 and just say, no, it can't go on like this with gain of function. We don't want to continue that. And in little Switzerland, the whole thing is happening. Interesting that you put up with that.
Just think about tariffs or something. I mean, that's all he can do.
No, we didn't write that. That would be harmful. We only said, John, just think about it. Exactly. You are the most important. Yeah? Just think about what is really happening there under your eyes. Yes, Switzerland is nothing more than a small canton of the USA.
That's how it feels sometimes anyway. Yes, that's how the Swiss often behave. That's the problem.
So we wrote something similar in a similar form to Robert Kennedy. And yes, I admit we also included a part for Robert Kennedy where we said, if you ever need an example of these persecuted doctors and scientists, I could consider reaching out. Well, yes, but I mean, such a practical example is always quite good, right? What are our next steps after writing these letters? Of course, we hope for a response. I am quite sure, Christian, he will be in Davos next week. From Davos to us in Simmental or to you in Eritz is half an hour by helicopter.
You're still laughing. Yes, you're still laughing.
Wait and see. And then he stands at the door and I open the door and say, no, clowns have no place here. But hello, Mr. Trump. So, well, we don't know. In short, what are our next steps? As our next steps are always to want questions answered. And we have a right to that. All of you sitting here have a right to have these questions answered truthfully. First question, who decides what is researched and on what at the Spiez laboratory?
Actually, you already know this, but we want to hear it again.
Second question. Who has authority over this sensitive laboratory? Thirdly, why is the Spiez laboratory in Switzerland conducting gain-of-function research when it has been banned by the United States? Why is Switzerland still in the WHO and even offers this controversial organization a home and immunity in Geneva?
How does Switzerland respond to Kennedy's letter as Switzerland is also affected? No, I mean, he couldn't get you out of that. A lot of harm has also occurred here. I just want to remind you of Thomas Binder and others who have suffered a lot of harm as doctors who stood up for the people.
And the last question, and I think it really hurts, not us, but those 7 there.
How does the Swiss Federal Council intend to position itself towards Trump and Kennedy? And I say, careful, careful. I'm not spilling any secrets, but in Meiringen, not a single F-14 takes off anymore if he flips a switch in America. They are all, of course, of American origin. The entire software is controlled from there. Then it's quiet in Meiringen. It's also nice when it doesn't bang there on Tuesday anymore, but be aware of the dependencies we are in.
I want to say thank you. And no, I did not go over time. I want to say thank you. And now someone is surely very happy, Christian. I didn't have to put this in this order. I naturally say thank you to Donald Trump as President of the United States. I thank Robert Kennedy for writing this letter.
He is the health minister, but officially it is called Health and Human Services Secretary.
I thank Jay Bhattacharya for becoming the director of the National Institutes of Health. And now you notice Jay. I know Jay personally. He is the one who created and enforced the Gate-Benton Declaration on the dignity of people during the corona crisis. You can see how seriously they take it there in the United States. I miss that a lot here.
Of course, Robert Malone, who has joined the Advisory Committee of Immunization, which is essentially the American equivalent of the STIKO.
Trump actually dismissed all the members of the STIKO, that is, all the members of this vaccination commission, and appointed Robert Malone among others. I don't want to clean up, for heaven's sake, but it would be a way of processing to get everything on the right track. And the USA clearly shows us this in this case. Not everything that glitters is gold, I must say. But what they are doing in that direction, what has happened in the last few days, starting with a condemnation of gain-of-function research, leading to the letter from Robert Kennedy that he is advocating for the people who are now suffering from persecution, that means something. My final thanks go to Christian Ock, to you. Christian, thank you for your commitment.
Thank you for...
Thank you for doing this for the association. You know that I always support you. I will never become a member of the association.
But I support everything.
And that's why I find it so important that we have these two graphics side by side. The President of the United States, his seal, and the emblem of us. I thank you.
Oh, thank you.